In 1996, Britpop seemed like an unstoppable force.
There's almost a sort of patriotic pride in it. We can do what we want.
The soundtrack to national events and a breeding ground for superstars.
We were the biggest band in the world because we were selling the most records and playing to the most people.
But with non-stop hedonism and excess...
We were going to party like it was 1999. We did for about 10 years, I think.
And ever heavier drug use.
London was covered in a blanket of cocaine.
This song was about heroin addiction, and I was quite shocked.
A sense began to grow that the party was almost over.
I was just tired, just worn out by the whole thing.
With bruising business battles...
I've smashed a few doors over it, I've screamed till the veins are coming out of you.
Big bust-ups.
It was just sloppily put together.
I don't think we could have made Coming Up with Bernard in the band.
And a startling change in the music being made.
Blur, when did those guys grow balls?
The music that started to come out, it all went a little bit more sinister and dark.
Some would pay a heavy price.
I know one thing, it's not nice being famous and skint and desperate.
We've got court cases, suicide, drug addiction. You couldn't make it up.
This is the final chapter in the story of Britpop. It's summer 1996. Britpop is at the peak of its popularity and looking to be on the brink of even greater heights. With the movement's biggest names all poised to return with new music, although each was facing a challenge. With Suede seeking to recover from the loss of a guitar genius, Pulp grappling with the price of the fame they'd sought so long, Blur regrouping after the bruising encounter with their biggest rivals, and Oasis eager to maintain their status as top dogs. The two nights that the Mancunians played at Nebworth, Hertfordshire that August had been the biggest concerts in British music history.
Nobody thought that one day we'd be playing to 250,000 people over 2 days.
Oasis were the biggest band in the world, and they were the best band in the world.
You couldn't even see the horizon, it was just all people. There's Noel looking out at the biggest crowd he's ever seen in his life and knowing that he and his band have made history.
The problem for Oasis was how to follow that.
We sort of walked off stage in Nebworth and announced that we were going to, go away and reinvent ourselves, and disappeared for 2 or 3 years.
Hindsight is great, I mean, at the time there was such momentum that hard to stop,
Driven by a fear that the bubble might burst, Oasis made a fateful decision. To head to America, despite the fact that previous demanding US tours had almost broken up the band.
Morning Glory, the album, was in the top 5 in America, and Wonderwall was in the top 3 or something. So we booked this huge kind of shed tour, and it was just that one tour too far. The whole thing collapsed over the jacket that Bonehead was wearing. When Liam said to him, "Where'd you get that jacket from?" And he went, "What's it got to do with you?" And he went, "I'm only asking." And it all escalated from there. And I remember being as they tumble off the tour bus in the hotel car park, thinking, I'm not having this. Let's not fight over a leather jacket with a fur collar.
While 2 years earlier, it had been Noel storming off in the middle of an American tour, this time it was Liam heading for the exit.
I come first.
You come before your fans, do you?
Leaving his brother to face the fallout.
It's very inconvenient, but there you go. I mean, life isn't easy. That's probably Liam now saying he's left. It's not a big deal to us, I mean, we'll just carry on regardless.
1 week later, Noel walks out on the group. The brothers return home on separate flights with the group's future hanging in the balance.
Need a little time to wake up. Need a little time to
that kind of went, no, I shall take my ball and I shall leave and I shall go back to England, you know. In hindsight, that was the wrong move. We only had 4 gigs left to do.
What's the story, morning and glory? Need a little time to wake up,
I mean, it was on the front page of the Sun.
What's the story, morning and glory?
Even in the glory days of the Beatles, you didn't get, you know, the Times printing John Lennon has a bit of a bad turn. It was as if Britpop forced a cultural change almost everywhere.
Amid tabloid conjecture that it was all over for Oasis, the band decided it was time for a show of unity.
The speculation was that we were going to split. To end that, somebody had the bright idea of going into the studio.
But as sessions began, the question was, what kind of album would emerge from a band in such turmoil? With Britpop's top dogs faltering, hoping to inject the scene with fresh energy were the group who'd inadvertently kick-started the whole thing in the first place, Suede. Yet expectations around their 1996 comeback album were muted. 2 years earlier, they parted company with guitar virtuoso Bernard Butler and replaced him with Richard Oakes, a sixth former whose first gig as a fan had been seeing Suede.
Out of the entire world of guitarists that they could pick, they find a 17-year-old who had never really been in a band.
He was incredibly shy. He was earlier, he was at school, and I was stunned about how perfect he was as a guitarist, note for note.
Richard Oakes, joined later by second new recruit Neil Codling on keyboards, had been thrust into an intensive period of live shows and video shoots, replicating the guitar parts Bernard Butler had played when he was in the band.
Obviously, he could carry it off playing the old songs.
One thing which was always at the back of my mind was, what's going to happen with the songwriting?
Then, as if to confirm fears that Suede had lost their true creative force, Bernard Butler returned as part of an unlikely duo with one of the most acclaimed singles of the Britpop era, the exultant Yes.
It is an enormous sort of theatre curtain of a song, isn't it?
So you wanna know me now, how I feel.
Hearing that amongst all the kind of indie rock stuff was such a breath of fresh air for me.
It is like I Will Survive in the Britpop way.
The gravity-defying vocals came courtesy of David McAlmont.
Bernard's aspiration at the time was just to write the happiest imaginable song, and he said, I've been listening to lots of Dusty Springfield, and that was enough for me.
Many were surprised at such an upbeat return from Butler so soon after his bitter exit from Suede.
I don't want to be called ex-Suede guitar player or something for the rest of my life. I don't really think I am. It's like talking about your ex-wife or something. Not that I've got an ex-wife, but I suppose you could call Suede my ex-wife.
I think that was Bernard just saying, look, I can write any kind of song, including a massive kind of pop hit that could be on a Broadway musical.
With Bernard Butler riding high, it seemed like the louche glamour of his Britpop pioneering former bandmates had had its moment.
The assumption was that it was all over for Suede.
The guys basically provided most of the music that's left the band, you know, and that was a big hole. It looked like they were sunk then.
We were down and out as far as everyone else was concerned, except us.
With all of the big Britpop names recording new material during 1996, the most intriguing return of the lot was that of Suede. It was their breakthrough that had originally led to the press coining the term Britpop, but then they lost guitarist and co-writer Bernard Butler. And when Suede returned to the recording studio with producer Ed Buller, they were fighting against a widely held assumption that the band were a spent force.
I just said, I think you should just pull out all the stops and make a pop record. I secretly wanted it to be Thriller. I wanted there to be, you know, 10 singles. Because I felt that the band really needed to come back with a bang.
Worries whether new recruit Richard Oakes could replace Butler as a songwriter as well as a guitarist started to ease when writing sessions with Brett Anderson resulted in future singles like Saturday Night and Film Star. But the head of their record company wanted more for the all-important first release that would herald the arrival of the new lineup.
Came to a point where I had to be the label boss and had to get tough and have that conversation. So we haven't got the first single, mate. You need to write another song. He was very unhappy. There was a lot of tension that day, bit of a fallout, but it did the job.
Trash started life off really just as a chorus, that's all they had. It was a great chorus, but it was just a chorus. But the verse they had was just nothing. It was just kind of this plod. And then Brett literally one day picks up a guitar and almost comically goes, "What about this?" And that was the verse, and it was great.
It just seemed to be almost like a Suede anthem about who we were as people and our lifestyles as people. And automatically it seemed to be a reflection on the lifestyles of the fans as well.
Trash. It was basically saying back to the fans, we see you, you get us, we get you, and we love you for it. Because they were the band for kind of sexually ambiguous youth and for people who dress in an unconventional way. Suede definitely provoked all the right people. They angered all the right people. And they absolutely gathered a tribe around them of people who felt the same way.
Against all the odds, Suede were back with a huge anthemic hit single and soon afterwards, the biggest selling album of their career.
Trash came out and went to number 3, and then Coming Up came out and went to number 1. In the end, there were 5 top 10 hits on that record, which no other band, apart from Take That, and certainly no indie band, had ever done. headline was Comeback of the Century. How did they do that? Which summed it all up, really.
Despite Suede's often expressed unease with the Britpop tag, for many, the British themes and upbeat, catchy choruses of Coming Up make it the last great Britpop album. Because change was brewing, as another unexpected 1996 return would suggest a more serious mood was taking hold. The guitar-toting anthemic choruses of Manic Street Preachers may have seen them second on the bill at the era-defining Nebworth gigs, but they were a world away from the stereotypically tongue-in-cheek lads of Britpop.
White boys with the guitars these days, it's pretty much mainstream, and it's pretty much kind of a million-selling racket, really.
Summer 1996 saw the band on a crest of a commercial wave, with million-plus sales for their Everything Must Go album.
The Manics made an album that chimed with the times more than anything else that they'd done before. It was accessible and you could sing along to it and it could get played on the radio.
While their music may have added fuel to the Britpop fire, the band's lyrics were hugely different to standard Britpop fare.
Wasted your life in black and white.
Their October 1996 #9 hit, Kevin Carter, focused on a photographer who, haunted by the poverty he'd seen in Africa, had taken his own life. This was a band steeped in social history and politics and unafraid to flaunt their learning.
We want to be so intelligent that we're never going to get beaten. We don't want to just rely on the passion of a true heart.
And one song, more than any other, took their worldview into the mainstream.
Life was give us power. Then what came and made us free.
A Design for Life begins with libraries gave us power, which they got from Newport Public Library.
They drew on these forces of the civic state that educated them, that nurtured them, that helped their families, and they put that into their music. I find their music incredibly moving and powerful for that reason.
Design for Life is, on the one hand, all about working class literacy, but also this bitterly sarcastic retort to the media's idea of what working class people are like.
A Design for Life reached #2 in the charts. The first of a run of 5 consecutive top 10 singles. But many of the band's new fans were unaware that their rise had been shaped by tragic loss. As the road that had taken them to Stadium Rock Triumph and the eventual triple platinum sales of the Everything Must Go album had begun a decade earlier as a 4-piece.
It's quite a strange situation for us sometimes. You're playing songs that people think are written by the three of us when they're not. Some of them might not even realise that, you know, Richie was in the group.
The band had formed in Blackwood, South Wales. Singer and guitarist James Dean Bradfield and drummer Sean Moore were cousins and were joined by bassist Nicky Wire, and on second guitar, Richie Edwards, sometimes known by the stage name Richie James.
We just want to mix like politics and sex.
and look brilliant on stage and say brilliant things. We're the most original band, I think, the last 15 years.
Their philosophy was far removed from the likes of Blur and Oasis, but they shared a similar confidence and determination.
The Manics were driven by pure ambition, and the way that they shaped that ambition was to cover it in lipstick and tinsel and references to Public Enemy and punk and Guns N' Roses.
The group's first 3 albums during the early 90s were in stark contrast to the optimism of much of Britpop, with many of the challenging lyrics coming from Richie Edwards, who spoke frankly in interviews about his own struggles with depression and self-harm. And then, on the 1st of February 1995, on the day of a planned promotional trip to America, Richie Edwards vanished at the age of 27.
Fears are growing for the safety of missing Welsh pop star Richie James after his car was found near the Severn Bridge.
For about 6 months after that, the 3 of them, they had no idea how to proceed. A lot of bands would have added another member to take Richie's place. Of course, he was irreplaceable, so the Manics continued as a threesome.
With the blessing of Richie's family, the band began sessions for the album that would become their 1996 masterpiece, Everything Must Go.
I think they put all the pain of that into the music. I guess they turned it into art and they made a great record.
Nearly half of the album's tracks included lyrics left behind by Richie Edwards.
You know, they've never ever forgotten Richie. They still put royalties in an account for him.
Although to this day the circumstances of his disappearance remain a mystery, Richie Edwards was declared presumed dead in 2008. But unlike many others from the Britpop era, this is a band that has continued without any split or lengthy hiatus for over 3 decades.
Beautifully written songs, always really arresting lyrics, and they tread the line between enormously sincere but actually amazing pop songs and having a theatre and a drama to them. Bless the Manics.
By the end of 1996, the mood was changing, and with Manic Street Preachers revealing a growing appetite for more serious and sincere music, the Britpop party scene was rapidly losing its sense of fun, with what had been carefree hedonism turning into serious addiction.
It just seemed like everyone was doing it.
I actually remember saying to Damon, I hope you're not taking that stuff, mate.
And the music taking a very un-Britpoppy turn.
Enough fucking trumpets.
With Suede and Manic Street Preachers reaching new peaks during 1996, it may have appeared British guitar pop was going from strength to strength. But beneath the surface, a feeling started to grow that change was afoot. And a sense that the 24/7 hedonism that had always been a big part of Britpop was beginning to take its toll. As a movement that had once been defined by innocence and fun was evolving into something altogether darker.
So when Britpop begins, it's very cheeky, it's very happy-go-lucky. If anything, it's beery. But every scene will have people who dabble in drugs. So that's what comes with having money and that lifestyle and a desire to experiment, shall we say, kindly.
At that time, it was so obvious that many of these pop stars, and notably Oasis, were taking huge amounts of cocaine. No one was questioning their taking of these drugs.
It's like getting up and having a cup of tea in the morning. And, you know, and some people realise that, then when I say it's tough, isn't it?
Drug scene was really dark. It was kind of a contrast to all that bright sort of, you know, saturated colours and chirpiness that was the forward presentation of it. Whereas behind the scenes, you know, people were injecting heroin into their knees.
You'd be amazed at the bands that were taking smack. It just seemed all pervasive. It just seemed like everyone was doing it.
The music that started to come out in 97 and 98, it all went a little bit more sinister and dark.
1997 would see the sound of all the era's major players change dramatically. But the most extreme stylistic U-turn of all came from the band who pioneered the quirkily British songwriting style that had characterised early Brit Pop.
I was in Dublin with Blur, and they said, we've got some new songs we're going to do tonight. And I was like, what is that? It was a real statement of intent. We don't want to be involved with that Brit Pop battle anymore. You know, we've changed.
Burned by the feud with Oasis, guitarist Graham Coxon and singer Damon Albarn have both been through difficult times personally in the period since their last release, The Great Escape. And that was reflected on their fifth album, Blur.
I think there's a point where Damon realises that he's let himself be led into an almost creative dead end. They had to move on for their own sanity and for creative longevity.
I'm not sure it was really discussed to any great extent, other than enough fucking trumpets.
It's a lot looser and a lot less preoccupied with characters and other people. It's about us. It's about all the sort of darker things that you know, have gone on in our lives, from my life.
We pushed the guitar to the fore. It was a more Graham-led album, I guess.
There was an effort to get back to kind of a more lo-fi, real kind of dirty indie kind of type.
A circus.
I'd heard rumours that heroin was kind of circulating this kind of Camden indie scene, and it was frightening because so much damage can come from that. I wasn't really aware that Beetlebum was about heroin at all.
It's about Damon's relationship with Justine from Elastica and how it's falling apart, and partly what makes it fall apart is heroin.
I overheard Damon kind of like, not joking, well, perhaps he was joking, but he was making light of the fact that this song was about his use of heroin. And I was quite shocked. And I actually remember saying to Damon, I hope you're not taking that stuff, mate, because that's bad news. I know a lot of damage can come from alcohol as well, and we've seen that with Graham, but heroin, I don't know, it's a different level, really. And, yeah, it wasn't something that I was comfortable with.
Blur were changing. Britain, once a source of inspiration, was now somewhere Damon sought to escape, with part of the new album recorded in Reykjavik, far from the Britpop party.
Damon had fallen in love with Iceland sometime previously, certainly then, and I think to some extent now it was kind of his retreat, really, you know, somewhere he could go and not have the sort of pressures of London life and the pressures of being a London celebrity.
The second single was the grunge-influenced track that had shocked Stuart McConey in Dublin.
Song 2 was like, this is just a fast, punky song. We just bashed it out in one afternoon. And the guide vocal that Damon did on it was so nonsensical.
When Damon does his guide vocals, he goes, shooby-doo-wah-ba-dee, down-pan-toots-a-fung-dang-ding, you know. He left the guide vocal almost completely intact and just picked out a few of the nonsense words and made them into real words.
Nothing sounded as good as the guide.
It wasn't easy,
And that's the one that's on the record.
but nothing is. No.
Even when the whole album was done, I don't think any of us knew. It was the record company going, you know, that's the single, that one. So it's not, you can't hear the words. It's less than 2 minutes long. It's never going to work.
The track reached #2 in the UK and saw the band finally make a breakthrough in America, where they had previously struggled.
I remember someone in America saying, Blur, when did those guys grow balls?
When I was young,
In America, I think they know it as the woohoo song.
it's not my problem.
America loves things that go woohoo even more than the rest of the world does. Every time any American football team scored whatever they score in American football, they would play woohoo. you know, and the crowd would go wild. So it just kind of permeated through American culture, really.
It's ironic in the sense that we were trying to do things that were slightly less commercial. To this day, it's the song that, you know, gets the most royalties.
Blur had decisively broken from Britpop, but an even more influential musical reboot was coming from a band led by a driven maverick.
Mad Richard, that's what his name was.
He used to go to school in a cape, so the legend goes.
As an unlikely new hero pointed the way to a post-Britpop world.
All we know is we put everything into it, and you can't give more than that.
By the start of 1997, the playfulness of the early Britpop days seemed an increasingly distant memory. Drugs were taking their toll. Blur had transformed, and even Britpop's little brothers, Supergrass, were growing up.
Inevitably, when it came to the second album, they went serious. So they did that with songs like Richard III.
Just like their classic Britpop single All Right had done 2 years earlier, Richard III reached #2 in April '97. But that's where the comparisons ended.
Well, it's an antidote to sort of All Right, I think.
It feels kind of quite timeless. It's sort of rock and roll song, but with, you know, a lot of depth to it as well in places.
The ironic and larky Britishness of early Britpop was being left behind. And while acts like Supergrass were going in a darker direction, others embraced a more reflective sound and lyrical approach. Unexpectedly leading the way in this were a band once dismissed as oddballs, cursed with a seemingly never-ending run of bad luck. As for many, the defining release of the year came from a man Noel Gallagher had described as a genius. Richard Ashcroft and his band, The Verve.
Happiness, more or less, it's just a changing me something in my liberty. On my mind. Happiness coming and going. I watch you look at me, watch my fever growing. I know just where I am.
The rebirth of The Verve was just electrifying.
They just made the right album at the right time. It's hard to say whether it would have been noticed if they put it out 5 years earlier or 5 years later, but they just picked their moment.
But I'm a lucky man with fire in my hand.
Although the path that took The Verve to that point, from formation in a Wigan sixth form college at the end of the 80s, had been strewn with setbacks.
I saw The Verve when they were Verve.
It was Mad Richard then, wasn't he? Mad Richard, that's what his name was. But, you know, this dark undertone to everything they did, you know, in terms of the music.
Richard had long hair, loose-fitting hippie shirts, flares, and no shoes on. And he danced on a prayer mat.
Their unique sound and unusual frontman meant that Verve had started to attract an early 90s cult following. But it was during sessions for their debut album in late 1992 that the band's run of bad luck began.
And while they were here one afternoon, there was a phone call from the lawyer saying, "We've just heard from Verve Records in New York. You can't use that name."
And they had to change their name because of the American jazz record label, Verve.
With the reluctant addition of "the" to their name, the next setback for The Verve came during a 1994 US tour, when, at a time well before excessive hedonism had become so prevalent among other Britpop-era bands, Richard Ashcroft's lifestyle had led to serious concerns about his health.
When he was on the Lollapalooza tour, he'd not been eating and drinking, and he was like dehydrated, playing in outdoor venues across America in the summer. And he sort of almost died, Ashcroft did.
Paying tribute to the talented but troubled Ashcroft, Noel Gallagher wrote Cast No Shadow, a highlight of their Nebworth shows.
Is it that for every man who tries to understand what's in his hands? He walks along the outer road of life and light,
funny how those things develop when someone like Noel idolising Richard Ashcroft, him being his hero.
When he said bound with all the weight of the words he tried to say, you can't be anything other than honoured, because he's a great songwriter, amazing songwriter.
But at the time of those Nebworth gigs, it had been seemingly all over for Richard Ashcroft and the Verve. After the unpredictable singer had unexpectedly disbanded the group in September 1995.
You've got to remember, this is something that's been going on since we were 16, 17 years old. So we just needed a bit of time to remember what it was about in the first place.
After a period away, the Verve returned, refocused and with a renewed determination.
We put it into perspective that the band's bigger than us, and we needed that. We needed that time away.
And among the selection of reflective new songs that they took into the studio, there was one that would prove a game changer.
Bittersweet Symphony is an indelible anthem of those times.
'Cause it's a bittersweet symphony that's life.
It's the slog of everyday life, just making money and trying to survive.
You're a slave to money, then you die.
The track came with one of the most striking videos of the period.
Bittersweet Symphony video is the iconic video of the Brit Pop era.
It was very anti-pop style, you know, just literally walking along a road, a street in Hoxton, bumping into people, not caring.
I mean, it's just a fantastic piece of work. Probably took him all day doing that.
I was walking down the street 400 times in the East End of London for 2 days.
The song reached #2 in June 1997. Perennial outsiders, the Verve had entered the mainstream. But even in this moment of long-awaited success, disaster was about to strike. The band's management received a call about the string part of Bittersweet Symphony, which sampled an arrangement of The Last Time by the Rolling Stones, from an orchestral album made by their manager in the 60s, Andrew Loog Oldham.
It's not the Jag and Richard song, it's the string part of it, of another version of it, which they didn't clear.
I need to hear some sounds that recognize the pain in me, yeah.
It's not in the Stones' hands, it's in the hand of some guy in a suit in New York City who owns their material.
Bringing a lawsuit over royalties was the legendarily cutthroat Alan Klein, who'd also managed the Rolling Stones and had gained control of the copyright for their early work.
Oh, we've not cleared it. Who are we up against then? Alan Klein? You're joking.
Past precedent meant the band prepared themselves to give up some of the royalties for the track.
They did have to give a percentage to Alan Klein. 100% was the percentage. And so, for a long time, Richard Ashcroft and the Verve got no money for that.
I've smashed a few doors over it, I've done the karate kicks, I've screamed till the veins are coming out of here when I first heard about it, you know what I mean? The Bittersweet Symphony, you're a slave to money, then you die. Then some geezer comes and takes all the publishing from it. It's sort of beautiful.
It would take 20 years and the death of Alan Klein for the rights to eventually revert to Richard Ashcroft and the Verve.
In some ways, cost them a lot of money, but in a lot of ways, launched them into the stratosphere.
But while the Verve's artistic achievement may not yet have been matched by commercial gain, that was far from the case with Oasis. With eventual worldwide sales of 22 million for What's the Story Morning Glory, the band were outgrowing Brit Pop and now living the lives of international rock superstars. Sessions for their third album had started at Abbey Road Studios, made famous by their heroes, the Beatles. And although recording had begun amid tensions after the disastrous US tour, the aim was to make a career-defining statement.
By the time Oasis got to that stage, they weren't thinking short, snappy singles. They appeared like they could just do whatever they wanted.
The band had never lacked self-confidence.
Noel had this unshakable belief in his music that it was much better than anybody else's.
We did Top of the Pops. Sting, I think, was on the same show, and Sting came to Noel and said, I love your song. To which Noel said, yeah, thank you, I think yours is crap.
The massive success of What's the Story Morning Glory had only added to this self-conviction. And a further complication when it came to making the follow-up was the Gallagher brothers' drug of choice at the time.
There was that kind of belief around them. And there were a lot of drugs around them as well. There was a lot of cocaine use, which they themselves talk about.
There's people turning up, knocking at the door with big bags of little things and stuff like that, and then we just go, oh, fuck it, we'll do it tomorrow. Yeah. You know what I mean? Have a sniff of that, have a beer and that, and then you just weren't concentrating.
It's a different kind of record, isn't it? Well, it is their Cocaine on Cornflakes record.
Evidence of how the band were veering towards old-school rock star excess in all its forms came with the lead single, 7-minute epic, Do You Know What I Mean? And it was decided that a track on such an extravagant scale needed a video to match.
There was a lot of expectation about it. It felt like it was quite a big deal.
Inspiration would come from the movies. Directors Dominic Hawley and Nick Goffey had a vision for the video, and that vision was getting their hands on as many helicopters as they possibly could.
John, our producer, wrote to the British Army, and this very nice guy who was in charge of training pilots, through a kind of incredible bit of luck, his daughter was a massive Oasis fan. So he said, yep, we're going to do it.
Decided to shoot at Beckton Gasworks, which is the same place that Stanley Kubrick filmed Full Metal Jacket, the movie. And so it had this kind of feeling of a war zone and a cinematic set. But we needed to know whether or not the army would be prepared to fly there. So we jumped in the back of this helicopter and it took off. And we sort of said, well, how low can you go? He said, we're the army, we can go as low as you want. We can land anywhere. And we said, oh, brilliant. We said, oh, can you fly between these ruined buildings? He said, well, if the rotor blades will fit, we can get through. So we were a bit nervous about it, but we realised that we could do all these amazing things with the army because they could basically go anywhere, they could land anywhere, and they could do all these aerial stunts. It's like the Red Arrows version of helicopters, basically, is what we had.
As the pre-CGI 90s meant the members of Oasis and the helicopters had to be filmed together at the same time, the next challenge the directors faced was keeping the famously video-phobic band on side for 2 long days on set.
Videos are they're necessary evil for me, and the video director generally 9 times out of 10 idiots.
When they turned up for the shoot, they came in 5 separate cars, and those 5 cars stayed there throughout the duration of the 2 days that we had them, just in case, you know, one of them wanted to leave.
Soon into the filming, Liam's patience was put to the test.
At one point, they flew so low over the set that they kind of blew part of the set over, and they blew Liam over. He kind of, like, ended up on the floor, and we were like, kind of, oh, shit, is he going to walk? He kind of got up and sort of smiled, and Noel laughed at him, and they got back on with it.
The finished video helped the band land their 3rd #1 single in July 1997. And their lofty status was underlined that same month with Noel's attendance at the so-called Cool Britannia party thrown by new Prime Minister Tony Blair.
I was just congratulating him on his success, and he's congratulating me on mine.
But some wondered whether the era's most influential figure being embraced by the establishment was another sign Britpop's days were numbered.
Him going to Downing Street felt a little bit like he was being neutered because he's sort of shaking hands, grinning ear to ear with Tony Blair. So it felt a little bit kind of diminishing of him in some way.
A further ominous sign was a growing sense of paranoia within the Oasis camp surrounding the new album.
At the time, the music industry in the UK and America were massively concerned with bootlegging.
Records are starting to leak, and no one knows where the leak is coming from, but nobody trusts anyone.
Fear of reduced sales, if new tracks appeared on the then emerging internet, led to unusual demands when it came to pre-release radio plays.
Made a meal and threw it up on Sunday. I've got a lot of things to learn.
They did say, can you talk over the beginning and can you talk over the ends, so that clean versions didn't end up being bootlegs overnight. They were trying to say, could you not just talk over the middle of it as well?
So what's the matter with you? Sing me something new.
And then the following day, their radio promo guy said, you're not getting more tracks because you didn't talk over the songs enough, and they're so worried at the label.
The waiting was finally over when Be Here Now appeared in late August 1997. And the first clue as to how undreamt of success had affected Oasis came in the archetypal rock and roll excess depicted on its sleeve.
Oasis's album covers are really interesting. They tell a story of Oasis, don't they? You're in Bonehead's sitting room, but it's small and it's in...
Britpop was being left behind. And with Oasis abandoning pop songs and Blur abandoning Britishness, it would be left to the third giant of the Britpop movement, Pulp, to sound its death knell.
What exactly do you do for an encore?
This Is Hardcore is kind of emblematic of how things go kind of sour.
You've had a really good time, but it's not great for the soul.
I remember thinking, yeah, something's gone wrong.
The returns in 1997 of some of the era's biggest names had seen them all looking to move on from the Britpop movement. But when it came to shaping the post-Britpop musical landscape, it wouldn't be Blur's new American-influenced approach, Oasis's overblown epics, or the 70s glam-tinged sound of Suede, setting the template for the next generation of indie-rooted guitar bands. As the emergence of 21st century giants like Coldplay and Snow Patrol can be traced to the release of one 1997 album, The Verve's epic Urban Hymns, a record which had started a buzz long before it was even released.
The entire music business had heard it months before it came out and just said, this is amazing.
Especially anticipated was a song that dated back to before the band's temporary split in 1995.
All this talk of growing old is getting me down, my love.
I remember hearing demos of Drugs Don't Work. I thought it was so tragic that no one was ever going to hear that because they'd broken up.
It was a track that saw Richard Ashcroft tackle personal demons in a way that he'd never done before.
And I hope you're thinking of me. You should lay down on your side. Now the drugs don't work, they just make you worse. But I know I'll see your face again.
I learned over the last few years to be able to open up myself, to be able to take the baggage off my shoulders, which enables you to sing about stuff that is real. You get to a point in your life where you think, I'm not going to hide anymore. And when you don't hide, you say what you really feel.
But I know I'm on the losing streak.
The song was given an epic, string-laden arrangement to match its heartfelt lyrics.
And if you want to show, then just let me know and I'll sing in your ear again.
The Drugs Don't Work had this incredibly lush, beautiful, enveloping feel to it. You felt like you were kind of wrapped in a velvety blanket when you heard it, and it was a very special song.
The scheduled release date was Monday, September the 1st. But the day before that, the world woke up to shocking news.
We are today a nation in mourning, in grief that is so deeply painful for us.
The poignancy of The Drugs Don't Work made it the perfect song for radio stations looking to reflect the emotions of a nation where millions were grieving.
The Verve managed to grasp the mood of national mourning, the melancholy, the looking inward.
Sometimes music touches you and you can't deny it.
Even more than Bittersweet Symphony had done earlier in the year, the song seemed to capture the public imagination. And it climbed to the top of the charts.
Now the drugs don't work, they just make you worse.
So it was cool, like, Drugs Don't Work went to #1. I was like, oh yeah.
And the sense that the Verve were the band that Britain needed at that point continued with the release of the Urban Hymns album.
My friend and me, looking through her red box of memories.
The British public, they didn't really want the brashness and the cocaine and the Rolls Royces and swimming pools of Oasis and Be Here Now, which had come out the month before.
Yes, there's love if you want it. Don't sound like no sonnet, my love.
The irony was, actually, the Verve kind of overtook Oasis at this point.
Don't sound like no sonnet.
The expectation had been that Be Here Now by Oasis would dominate 1997, but after replacing it at #1, Urban Hymns would go on to spend more weeks at the top spot.
I always knew there'd come a time when people would tune into the Verve and realise, like, how important this band is.
While the Verve were pointing the way towards a more sensitive and introspective post-Brit pop approach, one of the movement's defining acts, Pulp, were preparing the long-awaited follow-up to their hugely successful Different Class album. Although life in the Britpop limelight had seen frontman Jarvis Cocker struggle with the reality of the fame which he craved for so long.
Once he achieved that level of fame and what came with it in terms of the partying, drugs, alcohol, etc., etc., I think what also comes with that, and inbuilt with that, is intense paranoia.
You've done all the things that you never thought you'd get to do as a teenager in a bedroom in Sheffield. You've had a really good time, but it's not great for the soul.
It's that whole be careful what you wish for syndrome.
As with Blur and Oasis, the side effects of fame would affect the music of Pulp, although for Jarvis, there was a specific impact on his songwriting process.
To change your world.
He can't really operate like he did before, slyly listening to someone's conversation on the bus or in the cafe or in the pub, you know, thinking, oh, that's an interesting scenario. He went to New York maybe to try and recover some sort of anonymity.
The resulting songs were far removed from the playfulness of Disco 2000 and Common People, and the long-heralded return of Pulp in late 1997 with Help the Aged surprised everyone.
Help the aged. One time they were just like you.
I remember thinking, this is a strange one to come back with. I remember thinking, yeah, something's gone wrong.
Drinking, smoking, sex and sniffing glue.
The song saw Jarvis, by now 34, musing on the aging process.
In the meantime we try to forget that nothing lasts forever.
I just think it's interesting, you know, that people seem to really put off accepting responsibilities and kind of settling down for as long as they possibly can.
But even Jarvis's fellow band members were unsure about the follow-up single, as This Is Hardcore which would also be the title track of the album, delved into a murky world of exploitation and pornography.
I don't think I liked any of the imagery in hardcore. I didn't particularly like all the dark stuff.
It's a bit dense in places for me.
That kind of slow, slightly sleazy sound perfectly matched the lyrics and the sense that all was not right.
Although the single reached number 12 and the album went to number 1, this dark twist in the Pulp story was the clearest sign yet that, as 1997 became 1998, Britpop was running on empty.
This Is Hardcore is kind of emblematic of how things go kind of sour.
And Jarvis wasn't the only one feeling burnt out.
I mean, the dream was over massively. Everything was wrong. I was just tired. Just worn out by the whole thing.
Just think he wanted out, man, you know what I mean?
A friend of mine said, when did Britpop die?
As the 90s neared their conclusion, the writing was on the wall for Britpop. The spirit of optimism that had fueled its rise had been replaced by paranoia, disillusionment and drug problems. The party looked to be almost over.
There was this sense of the night creeping in and that nothing's going to be the same again.
Why did Britpop go into decline? I mean, you can't rewrite kink songs forever, can you? Eventually, people are going to get bored of that.
Change was in the air. On the one hand, with the new seriousness of bands like The Verve and Manic Street Preachers, and on the other, with fresh pop heroes in the wings.
Robbie Williams was waiting to step into Britpop's shoes, and all of a sudden he became the biggest thing ever.
Pop was, you know, in its purest form, was coming back.
And this changing of the guard came with a human cost.
You look but turned away, just walk away, walk away.
I mean, the dream was over massively by then. Everything was wrong. I was just tired. Just worn out by the whole thing. I just hung around, like, you know, in my pyjamas, stoned for about 3 months.
As Britpop rapidly went out of vogue, many of its former stars faced a new reality.
'Cause loneliness seems such a waste.
It was really dark. I mean, you know, when you leave a successful band, you're going to get hit with tax bills and all sorts of stuff, which I did. It was a bloody nightmare.
This loneliness seems such a waste. I can't stop feeling lost.
And I know one thing, it's not nice being famous and skint and desperate.
I can't stop feeling lost.
I promised my wife that I was going to be a pop star. And I'm bloody stacking shelves in Tesco's in Northern Ireland, escaping the tax man. It was really dark and it was very lonely.
I remember phoning up a friend of mine who was the booker at Sheffield Lead Mill, who sounded like he was having a really terrible morning, and he said, when did Britpop die? The advance sales for Echo Belly were somewhere in the region of about 60 tickets.
High above the rooftops, higher than the Milky Way.
The whole bottom of Britpop just disappeared, fell down a black hole, and we're just finished. We've got no money. Our accounts had been reduced to £200. That was all that was left. That's the end of Echo Belly.
One by one, the stars of Britpop called it a day. With Oasis finally giving up the ghost in 2009 when Noel walked away for good.
I just think he wanted out, man, you know what I mean? Good luck, mate. See you in the next world. And don't be late.
It's now 30 years since Britpop started, and the period divides opinions.
These days, the media really sneer at it. But you know why? Because it was people's music.
Maybe I don't really want to know how you got and grows, 'cause I just want to fly.
A lot of the people who disown Britpop and disown their involvement with it, it's rather like people who are trying to disown an embarrassing haircut or something they said at a party.
I just soaked you to the bone. Maybe I just wanna fly, wanna live but don't wanna die. Maybe I just wanna breathe. Maybe I just don't believe.
But 3 decades on from the feuds and the fallouts, the mayhem and the era-defining music, how do the men and women behind it all look back on that time?
I have nothing but fond memories of it now. Happy days.
I feel a bit privileged that we were caught up in that.
It was a great time in life. I'm glad I was there.
It was very heady, but you kind of lost your bearings of life a bit.
It was all brilliant and I had the absolute time of my life, which is partly true. But also remember there was a dark side to it as well.
Today, with Pulp, Blur and Suede back in action, and Liam Gallagher having revisited the scene of his greatest triumph, Nebworth, for many, the Britpop era is ripe for re-evaluation.
I've talked to people now, and as far as they're concerned, forget the 60s or the 70s, the Britpop era was the best to them. It's just amazing times.
Some of the greatest British pop records ever got made in that period. Some of the most interesting British pop personalities come out of that period.
There was a sense of we can do anything, and a rather appealing, I think, arrogance. Everybody in that scene understood we are part of the Britpop era.
It will go down in the annals of history as a quirk, you know, a moment of quirkiness.
We don't have any pop stars like Jarvis at the moment. We don't have any bands like Oasis.
That's some brilliant years, but I don't remember much of it, to be honest with you.
I still think we're relevant, you know what I mean? I think if we got back tomorrow, it'd be business as usual.